Welcome, everyone, to Chief Architect Network Live. This is a new series of conversations about maximizing the value of the role of enterprise architecture in enterprises. I'm one of your hosts, Brian Chambers, and I'm really excited to have Grant with me today. I guess I should tell you I am a chief architect at Chick-fil-A, and then let Grant introduce himself and then tell us a little bit about the Chief Architect Network as well. That may be a new term to some folks. So tell us a bit about that, and then we'll talk about the topic we have today, which I'm really excited about.
Awesome. Yeah, my name's Grant Ecker, founder and chairman of the Chief Architect Network. I'm a recent graduate from Danaher, where I was their global chief architect. Prior to that, Walgreens Boots Alliance, and prior to that, Medtronic. I also helped build the architecture practices at Lowe's Home Improvement with a lot of good friends over there. So let me tell you a little bit about our network. We are maximizing the value of architecture practices through our network that widens our perspectives, shares our best practices, grows us as leaders, develops our talent, and drives outcomes. We're a community-led organization that is free from direct selling with our members as a network, and we're also entirely cost-free. So it's just about really bringing people together and trying to create some community and sharing some knowledge. So it's really a lot of fun, and it's quite a joy to be here.
Yeah, it's a great chance to plug the network and just say that if you're someone who is in a chief architect role and you happen to be listening, we'd love to have you as part of our community. So like Grant said, it's free. It's really about growing the chief architect connections. That's why we like the word network in our title, about growing those connections across the industry, which help us all just get better at what we do, share things that we've learned, help each other with sticky problems we may be dealing with, and just get better together. So it's pretty awesome. Well, without further ado, we'll jump into our topic today. And I think it's going to be a fun one to kick us off here. So what we're going to do is talk about 8 things. We had some people who said only 8. I mean, we could do 800, I guess. But just for the sake of time, we're going to talk about 8 things that we think chief architects should be doing in their practices, or really any enterprise architect who's doing their role should be doing. And Grant and I are going to take turns here and just do 4 each. So Grant, why don't you kick us off and tell us what's the first thing that chief architects or enterprise architects should be doing in their role?
Number 1 to me, build community. We have to bring people together. If we're not doing that, it's not really enterprise, because you can't design an enterprise in a room by yourself. So it really starts with building trusted relationships, aligning with enterprise goals, collaboratively designing solutions with the architect leads. So think about those steps, right? First, you're talking to the CIO, their leaders, and really getting them to kind of know you and getting kind of a two-way rapport built, and then understanding what their goals are. Now you're bringing together their people, their leads, the chief architects in their various functions, or the domain lead or the business lead architect, and starting to say, okay, this is what our leaders have, what they all want. Some goals are in common, some aren't. How do we start to make and maximize a plan that will put all of us in the trajectory of their success, and design that with them? Don't just sit there and think, I'm going to come up with all the answers. You're not. You're definitely not. There's nuance. There's constraints you're not aware of. So bring these leaders in with you and start to understand what that approach could be. Then after they come together with you and you now have a little bit of the outline, go back to the leaders and say, hey, if we did this, would this really satisfy what you're looking for? If this happened, if we ran this marathon and we got to the end, would you clap? These are great questions to ask, right? And then once we get there, okay, great. We've got leaders aligned. We've got the executives aligned. Now let's go back to the community, the folks that are sort of that next layer of architect leaders, the folks that maybe we have 10 to 20 that represent the leadership. There's probably another 10x that are the folks that contribute to the architecture practice. Share the vision, put it all out there. This is what our leaders want. This is what we think we can do. And then you sort of end up with a who's with me, right? Like, which of these things are you passionate about? Which of these things align with your individual goals? Talk to Steve about this, talk to Jenny about that, and start to bring people into a group conversation.
Yeah, love Steve and Jenny, always super helpful. Grant, I know you're not just making this up, or you didn't just read this in an article. I know you've done it before. Is there anything that you would expect that people who are maybe trying this for the first time might run into that could be a potential challenge? And if so, and it's one that you figured out how to overcome, any advice for them as they would get started kind of undertaking this journey?
Absolutely. I think the number one thing we always run into is this trust gap, right? Like why should I trust you? You're in my space, you're taking up room. Like this is, I don't understand. I immediately am skeptical that you're here to push some other agenda, right?
Right.
So that's why the relationships are so important. Sit down and understand especially those skeptics and those challengers, what's important to them, where they've been burned in the past, what they would want out of this, and what their resistance is to potentially contributing. Like if we have to bring everyone along, maybe we'll actually be too slow to market on what we're trying to build. So kind of understanding those pain points and saying, well, maybe on these things you do need to go it alone, but in these things you probably can't get there alone. So why don't we partner on the ones that we all have to do together? And I'll prove to you that we're here for the same purpose in trying to drive an outcome. But
Hmm.
building trust is the number one thing. And the most important thing you can do in building trust is to minimize the denominator, which is self-interest.
Yeah.
Right? Spend time on intimacy, spend time understanding, building those relationships. But then your self-interest is what cuts all that down by a factor of whatever that shows up like. So it's really important that you kind of bring a humble approach, a curious approach, and a true desire. And if it isn't true, if it isn't authentic, they're not going to believe it because it
Yeah.
isn't.
It's going to
Right?
get sniffed out quick.
Yeah.
That's a great answer. I really love that. Anything else you want to say about the building of community?
No, I think we should move to yours next. We got one coming up here.
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to start with think fast and think slow, which is kind of stolen from a book with a very similar title, Thinking Fast and Slow. So essentially, that book lays out an interesting idea, and it's that there's two systems in terms of how we think. There's system one, if you will, which is kind of the fast, intuitive, emotional, kind of automatic. It doesn't take a lot of effort. There's not a lot of deep thought in it. And that's a really important thing in the role of architecture. Like you're going to be in situations where you need to be able to think on your feet. You're going to need to be able to respond to questions. You talk about building trust, like sometimes showing that you understand and that you've got it, that you can listen and you can think quickly will earn you some of that trust. So that's kind of the part one. Then there's a second system, which is system two, and that's the slow, deliberate, logical, disciplined side of things. And I find that it's really easy for me, at least personally, to do a lot of the system one, like think on my feet, come up with something that makes sense really quickly. But I think the system two part is also really important in the architecture role because it's one of those things where we really think about how all the pieces come together. We can create something that's vision oriented, that really we think about how people will receive it, how it can be sticky and how it can connect with them over the longer term, how we can rally around that particular thing together. I also think this is where a lot of the deliverables work happens, like taking time to build things that can be left behind when you go away from something you're engaging on that can set those people up for long-term success. And I think it's easy to give this less effort because sometimes it feels like it just takes a ton of time. And it's like, I can bounce to all these different meetings and have all this fast influence. And, and it feels really good because I'm, changing contexts and fighting fires and all that kind of stuff. But I think we need to make sure that we have time to do that slow, deliberate, diligent thinking. And then we need to take that thinking and we need to turn it into things that we can share in whatever form that is. I mean, for some organizations, it's slides. For other people, it's writing. For others, it's just preparing for the next meeting where you're going to be speaking a bunch and sharing something. But that's going to be mine. Is I think it's important to make sure that you have a balance between your fast thinking, that you can do it, it's important, but you also make time and make sure that you have that slow, deliberate thinking time in your calendar as well.
Where has this been challenged for you, Brian? Where have you found yourself just doing one, the other, or neither, and kind of had to check yourself back into the healthy approaches?
I think most people in our roles have a lot of demands on their time. There's no shortage of meetings that you can go to. And if you aren't protective of your calendar, it probably fills up before you even have time to realize it. And so if you're ever looking for white space and you're like, there isn't any for like 3 weeks, then you're kind of already behind and you've kind of already lost the battle of being able to do that. So I've had times where that's been true. And again, like it can be really fulfilling to bounce between conversations, feel good about yourself because you said some smart stuff while thinking on your feet and move on. But then you can find that like, I found that sometimes maybe the most important thing I should really be focusing on, being diligent about and developing, further kind of suffers as a result. So I keep doing the quick snappy things that have to eventually be like this thing is kind of floundering, doesn't have the momentum that I thought it would, or it's just not going anywhere and it needs more focused energy to make that happen. So I've got to, what I do now, maybe a tip for people is I block time on my calendar like indefinitely ahead. Like I have what I call heads down Wednesday. And so every Wednesday after I get home from my lunch workout is blocked on my calendar. And sometimes I'll make exceptions for that, but I try and keep it as a time where I can actually do work. I can think, I can write things down, I can create deliverables if needed, I can plan for presentations, I can do that slow, thoughtful work. So that's kind of been my experience with it. What about you? Does that resonate with you at all?
100%. There are times when you can get into the flurry of activity, because really, to me, the thing that absolutely causes architecture practices to thrive is momentum.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very easy to just keep pushing and pushing and pushing, and to not slow down to think about, did I miss anybody? Did I fail to invite somebody? Did I fail to involve somebody? So that kind of like pace versus bringing people along, versus the opposite of, am I seeking too much agreement? Am I really wanting to make sure every single CIO says yes before I'm willing to move an inch? And I find that if you find yourself in that analysis paralysis, your momentum's gone, and so is the energy and the excitement, because ultimately it's that community pushing things forward that causes the practice to be successful.
Yeah, that's really good. Well, let's get back to you, Grant, for your second one and our third overall. What you got?
Lead technology. I know it sounds obvious, but a chief architect needs to lead technology. We got to localize the common goals for technology, similar to what we did for the overall organization. But what are our technology specific goals? And then in order to achieve them, you got to know where you are now. Now, I don't encourage folks, because this is the trap, go collect current state forever. No, go collect the pertinent current state that is needed to drive our technology goals forward. If we're not seeking app rationalization as a goal because we have a dramatic amount of growth, and we simply need to figure out how to enable these new technology perspectives or capabilities, well, don't spend time collecting and cataloging everything out there. Be with the business and what's important to them. And now, where we actually do need to enable some of these things, maybe we're building a data ecosystem to drive out the new AI ecosystem we're creating that's going to sit on top of that. Okay, well, to get from here to there, we better understand, what are the systems in play? What are our data sources, and how, are they at the level of data quality and curation required to drive the outcomes we're seeking? Now that we understand some of these things, we can start to build the roadmaps with the domain leaders. Again, super important. Don't sit in a room by yourself and think you're going to come up with the entire technology strategy. It's a huge mistake. Bring in the people that are experts in this space and start to build with them, bring them along in the journey. And I find that's incredibly powerful. And then we can align our targets with the strategy and programs we have that are coming down the pike. So if we know that we're going to be touching a major ERP solution, and we have a goal to move off of batch to API driven integration calls, well, let's take the opportunity to build where we're already, build our strategy where we're already going to be picking up tools and working on a construction site. Inventing a new construction site no one else was touching is always the harder path. Pick the easy stuff first, where we're already doing work. Well, let's add some effort onto that, add some funding onto that, and be able to actually push us towards our technology strategy in a more thoughtful way. Does that resonate for you, Brian? What do you think?
It does. I mean, I think that's a really important area. We, in our practice of enterprise architecture, like our roots are actually really focused almost only on the technology in the early days, which I think might actually be an anti-pattern as well. Not that doing that means that it's technology for technology's sake, because for us it was still for the business's sake. But it's easy to get a brand as like the really smart tech people too, and I think you want to balance the brand that you have between you are able to help the business pursue their outcomes and bring technology to the table that's appropriate. And a lot of that, I think, like you need sometimes a deep knowledge of technology, but can you communicate it and roll it up in a way that people can digest? Like, can you take something that's probably pretty complicated, simplify enough that it's useful, but not so much that it just sounds so easy that they're like, why are we talking to you about it? It sounds like we can just do it. And I think finding that balance can be tricky sometimes, but absolutely. I think this is a super critical area. that all of us need to be leaning into on a regular basis. And it's a challenge to stay sharp and make sure you know what's out there in the landscape, what's coming, what are the hot areas that executives are hearing about from their friends at other companies, because they all have them. And even if you think it's a good or not good technology, make sure that you can speak to it and sort of understand, could it be useful to your business? And maybe more so, like if it's not useful, be able to articulate why, because there's hype trains that come through and you may or may not want to be on all of them.
Love that. All right, well, let's go to your next item, which is scalable models. Tell us about it.
I'm going to add a little bit to that and say that this is really about building scalable and shareable mental models. So, Grant, as you know, like big enterprises have a lot going on. So I'm actually, I mentioned I'm the chief architect at Chick-fil-A, and I'll have been there for 20 years on Friday this week, which is pretty crazy to think about. So I've actually seen Chick-fil-A grow from not really a huge organization to pretty darn big today. I mean, it's a big company. And I think that's where I've learned this from. So I remember the days where you could get pretty much any question answered, anything figured out, anything done by like walking down the hall to the office of a person you knew, who was right there and available, and just having a conversation and sorting it out. And the bigger you get, the less that works. If you're leading an architecture practice in a large organization, like not everybody even knows that each other exists. There's all kinds of different goals and like department level initiatives that people are pursuing, and just it becomes a challenge. So I think one thing that we can be doing and that we should be doing is figuring out what are the things that we can build, and I don't mean technology things. What are the things that we can build that help people maintain just enough shared context? So we don't need everybody to understand everything about what everybody else is doing. We need abstractions there that lets teams be independent, distributed, autonomous, work at the speed that they can work, go after the business outcomes that they're after. But we need to help people also realize that if their outcome is successful and everybody else's in the company fails, like that's not good for the company. We need to realize that we're part of a larger enterprise, hence enterprise architecture. So I think building things that people can use to have the appropriate context when needed, but still say loosely coupled, to use another systems term, loosely coupled with the rest of the organization are really important. So like some examples of things, I call these tools that you can think on top of. And that would be things like a business capability model, for example. Like in a business architecture practice, you can go around and figure out like, what is it that we actually do here? How does our organization work? What are the things at a fundamental level that we do? And then start to layer in things that add value, whether they're enterprise architecture owned things or you extend your model to other groups that want to have a shared foundation. I think that can be a really powerful tool, and it gets people thinking and talking the same way about what they do, and then how like people process data, technology, layer in and support that thing. So I think that's a pretty awesome tool that you could use. Another one that I'm a super huge fan of is principles. And I think principles are really good because like, technology changes fast. Sometimes standards and things like that change, pretty frequently. But I think principles are things that change at a very slow speed. And so once people get them, you get a long-term benefit from them. And you can keep, building on top of them in terms of mental models. So we have a whole bunch of principles that help us in our practice sort of share the enterprise architecture mindset with people that we may not get a chance to talk to every time they take on new work, or at least maybe it's a trigger that they should talk to us if they run into something and they're like, how should we think about, this particular problem? Oh, I think I saw a principle about how to think about build versus buy. Let me go check that out and see what that said. So we historically have had 7 key principles. They're around things like, loose coupling of systems, designing for composability, build versus buy, how we maximize cloud, things like that. We're actually in an activity right now of kind of doing a 2.0 to simplify down to 3 or 4 of them, but really hitting the same things. Like, what are the themes in the organization right now that everybody needs to really know and that are going to hold true for 3, 4, 5 years at least, and build those out so that everybody can have that sort of shared foundation. So that's just 2 examples. You may have others, Grant, but I think that idea of like listening and understanding what's going on, turning it into something that's shareable context that people can build on top of as they think about their work or extend as a model. And then, turning those deliverables into things that you dish out across the organization that kind of help support the things that are important to you in your practice. How about you, Grant? What do you think?
Well, I think you're spot on, but in the interest of time, I'll push us forward one because
Yeah.
this is a great conversation. I could spend hours on it. We'll jump to the next one, which is focus. And I think this is something we absolutely have to do. We have to drive business strategies with our CIOs, elevating proposals that are coming up from the architecture community that can help meet those things, right? So you kind of have this top focus, right? And then understanding peers' goals and activating the community to their outcomes, right? So where are the folks across the organization and what are they trying to achieve? Some of them are going to match the CIO and the business strategy. Some of them are going to be a little bit more distinct. So how do we sit with those folks and ensure that, especially because of parts of our community are in their organizations, so we can't just do the things from the top. We have to satisfy the folks that are at our sides as well while we make the things happen that are coming from the top. We've got to make everyone kind of win, right? So it's one of the reasons I love architecture. It's the art of making everyone around us win.
Good. I like that.
And then what about the architects, right? These are the people that are the ultimate, core to this whole thing. Well, if we're going to do all these great things together, let's make sure they're getting something out of it. Let's make sure that it aligns with their career goals, that aligns with what they want to learn, what they want to grow, that we create exposure opportunities as we create the CIO's path forward or their leader's path forward. Let's put that person who came up with some key pieces that delivered a lot of the work in front of those leaders so they have a chance to sort of get that exposure and get the benefit that they were seeking out of engaging with this community. How's that land, Brian? What do you think?
I like it. I think that's really good. I'll keep us moving too, just for the sake of time. We'll go a couple rapid fire here.
Yeah.
All right. So I think every chief architect, enterprise architect, aspiring, architect, actually every person should be writing. And I'll tell you why. I don't think there's anything that will help you clarify your thinking better than putting it on paper in front of you or on a computer. I type my writing. But I think it's a very powerful tool that gets you to clarify your thoughts, to think through things thoroughly, back to that kind of slow thinking idea, that disciplined thinking. And I think writing is a powerful tool for that. Also, if you're willing to put your writing out there in the public, it does a whole bunch of other things that are pretty cool. One of those is if you know that people who don't have that same shared context with you are going to read what you write, you'll actually find yourself practicing the art of getting people to the same place as you really quickly. Like you might need a paragraph to take somebody who's never heard of your business and get them to a point where they can understand this technology topic you're going to talk about. And that's a really great thing to be able to do. And if you can do it with an external audience with no shared context, like how much easier does it get to do it internally with people who do have some shared context that you're trying to bring along, communicate to, and share a vision with. So I think it's incredible in that way. Again, if you do it publicly, it also creates all sorts of opportunities to connect and network and find others who are maybe interested in what you're saying and even create friendships. So it's a pretty powerful tool. I think everybody should do it without question. What do you think, Grant?
I completely agree. And I'll also take a moment to invite our colleagues in the Chief Architect Network to jump into our private community on LinkedIn, where we have a link. You can join us on video for the final 15 minutes here with some dialogue. So we'll just bring in each of you individually and give you guys a chance to share your thoughts. So hop into our private LinkedIn group and join us as a part of our network.
Awesome. All right, Grant, how about you? What's your seventh one?
I think we have to be focusing on advancing our skills. None of us got to this job and we're done growing. So when we start to think about this, it's about like across the board, right? Sure. There's the technology, leadership, and influence. That's very visible. It's very important. And if we're not doing that, we need to be stepping more into that. But in addition, how are we bringing people along? How are we guiding strategy, vision, and growing our thought leadership, both internally and externally? Networks like the Chief Architect Network to be able to broaden our viewpoint and bringing those insights into our organizations. Challenging folks, right? It's very hard to just to be the challenger in an organization. It's easy to go, oh, okay, we'll do what you said, right? And try to build it. That's a short-term tactic. If you want to build a long-term architecture function, you have to challenge and ensure that people are kind of weighing their decision. And honestly, they trust us to do that. So step into that more boldly if you're not already there today. Guide solution designs, right? Bring bring the solution design and scoping with the business impact. So it's easy to also kind of sit in solution designs and only think about them myopically to the scope you might be looking at. But if you understand the business impact, how it ties to strategy, you can understand how much to accelerate and how much to apply into a particular solution. Because sometimes just enough is good enough, and other times this is foundational to where we want to be in the next 5 years. We've got to really, really pour some concrete in the foundation so that this can stand up and support the business we plan to build on top of it. And then one of my favorite ones I saved for last here, which is building leadership with EQ. IQ got us into the architecture profession, but it's EQ that helps us grow as chief architects. Emotional intelligence, understanding everyone around us, bringing together a thoughtful conversation, understanding people's pain points, creating inclusivity, just showing you care. It's simple, right? Like, I used to think the work was the TPS reports and getting the solutions out the door. As a chief architect, the work is the people, getting everyone to come together on a common approach, both in what we should do and how we should do it. And I think really leaning into that and growing your skills in that space you can become a coach, you can spend time in mentoring, you can spend more time in sort of developing these skills with a mentor, right? I think it's very important that this is a thoughtful focus for us.
That's really great. Yeah, I think we can't overstate the importance of helping raise the bar, in people around us, or the waterline, like helping people who maybe don't understand technology, who are in leadership roles, to understand it, or helping people, just take steps towards what's next for them. Like, it helps our practices succeed, and it's fun because you get to watch other people grow and succeed as well, like mentoring relationships and things like that. So I think that's really awesome. That's great, Grant. Good stuff. We'll go into the last one. So my last one is to have a macro focus versus a micro focus. And what I mean by that is it's really easy, especially if you come from a technology background, to see any individual solution, the team around it go and make choices that you're like, that's not the right choice. And I know it's not going to go well. It's easy to get really fixated on that. It's easy to get frustrated if you can't influence them to do what you think is best. If they don't necessarily follow your advice or your opinion, or even your standard, sometimes that can be really frustrating. But I think it's important to not get too fixated on every little detail and be able to raise up and just look at the macro and say, okay, like, is our business or businesses, are they investing in the things that are going to get us where we need to go strategically and big picture? Are we, let's just say that since everybody talks about AI right now, AI is going to be something that's really important. It's like, are we putting some energy into that? And do we see it starting to pick up in the pockets that are going to be the most impactful? Maybe there's great opportunities other places, but it's like, are the most important things happening? I think focusing on that, and then maybe just asking yourself overall, like, are we winning? Are we ending up with good architecture in our organization? It's not going to be perfect. There's not going to be model purity. Everything's not going to be the same. People are going to make different choices. People are going to make mistakes and hopefully learn from them. But at a high level, are we winning? Are we moving in the right direction? And is there energy going into the things that are going to be the most transformative as we look at the challenges, that lay ahead of us? If you have a multi-year strategy, or you just know the business areas and know that they're after something specific, I think really focusing on that and not losing sight of that because you're chasing all the little details, frustrated by the details, and end up dwelling on those. So I think just raising up and looking at that big picture answer, like, is the business winning? Are we making the right moves in the right direction?
Love that. Well, let's zoom out and look at these holistically and invite folks, if you're on LinkedIn with us, make a comment. You can also do that on YouTube. Chief Architect Network on either platform will bring you to us. Also, for the folks that are members of our network, feel free to use the link to dial in and join us if you'd like. What questions do you have? And as we're sort of waiting for those, we'll also kind of take stock of this. So like Nathan had shared earlier, it's really about just enough shared context. Capability maps and some of the things Brian talked about there are super important as we think about the scalable models. Scalable so that all of us have shared context and are building in the right way.
And I think the just enough idea is really important there, because even with you're trying to build a capability model, not because you need to have a textbook business architecture practice. Again, you're doing it so that people have a shared understanding. The leader on my team who's responsible for our business architecture practice has been amazing at intentionally guarding the scope of ours. Like there's so much you could do and could add that sounds really great, but keeping it as simple as possible makes it possible to maintain and to keep using, so that you can get the wins that it really is there to serve. Like it in and of itself is not a business win, it's an enabler. So I think that just enough idea in all areas is really important. We're never going to get to perfect context, but just enough shared so that we can make good decisions, good investments, and move the business in the right way. So I think that's a great comment from Nathan.
You too. Also, looking at what Anand shared a little bit ago, and I think it's kind of insightful what he's sharing here. It's not everyone in the enterprise that like the word technology, and the word solutions sometimes gets a little more traction because solution implies we're solving a problem, right? Solution. Where technology, especially in some of the latest buzz we're seeing in AI and others, right, that can be a little bit for what purpose, right? Or we all understand the plumbing that goes beneath the sink, but it's there to drain water. That's its point. It's not there for aesthetics or for its own right. It's hidden. It's not infrastructure you see, and that's how a lot of technology lives. How does this land for you, Brian?
No, I think that's good. I think it probably very much depends on the organization, who you're talking to, and what people are used to hearing. So maybe another item that we could have put on this list was just to listen, and kind of pay attention to what's going on in your organization. Like you don't have to be in the role and just create everything and take everyone down your path. A lot of times it's just what is going on? Where's there already momentum? What are people already thinking? Where's there already some excitement? And figuring out how to plug into those things and leverage those things to make sure that you go down a good road, architecturally, people, process, data, technology, et cetera. So I think it's a good insight, and it'll just depend on each company.
Also, this one just came in from Anand as well. Like in the macro focus, believe that enterprise architecture starts with the business architecture, understanding the company's OKRs and how to tie them together to create business fabric as the key. Completely agree. Even when we started this conversation with the community, right? We start with the business, we start with the leaders, and try to stitch together what the company's trying to achieve, which is business architecture. And then I like to trace that down into, okay, what are the things we need? Let's say these are the key capabilities. What are within that? Is it people, process, info, or tech? And how much gap do we have in each? And then systematically going through that. People and process, are there business streams that we need to be standing up? Information, what are the information assets that come into scope, and how are we sort of addressing where we need to curate, build data quality, or even build data dexterity, where we just simply don't have the detail we need and need to start to collect it. And then we start to move into solutions in tech, right? Actually, in many ways, it follows the TOGAF wheel. I mean, it's not like I think many of us crack open that manual and follow that process as we execute, but the thinking and the style of that very much starts with that wheel of understanding into how we actually build, and then into sustainment.
Yep, 100% agree. I think as your organization develops strategy, like we do ours pretty much on a 3-year cycle. As there's a 3-year strategy, areas of disproportionate focus, like we're working on how do we layer that into our capability model. So it's something we can look at what capabilities are supporting each of these different strategy initiatives. And then, we can help people understand like how much investment is already being put into those, what's involved in them from a people, process, tech, data perspective, answer those kinds of questions, but then also figure out like where do we need to put the pedal down in some of those areas in order to make this bigger strategy outcome happen. So I think, again, talk business capabilities a lot, but that's a great tool that can help you achieve a lot of these things that we've discussed. And if you're not doing that yet, find a friend in the Chief Architect Network who's done it and can probably share a lot about what they've learned about how to build that practice and, how to take it forward.
I love it. Well, actually, since we've got a minute, let's just take a second and just talk a little bit about the network that we're rolling out here. And this has been pretty exciting. It's really about creating this common purpose in understanding things around our profession, and then really building out those best practices, developing as leaders, growing our talent, driving outcomes. I think the outcomes are the thing that I think is something that needs some of the most focus, because we have a lot of practices out there that aren't necessarily seen as key enablers of that business value. So for us to really be business outcome centric, I think is something that differentiates architecture practices and something we want to be able to create for each other. So for those of you listening who might be chief architects, and we define that there's plenty of chief architects, and we're not diminishing others that might have a different definition, but we're trying to create a collaboration of people who lead architecture practices of a significant scale. So 10 or more direct FTE, because there are a lot of practitioner forums out there. There isn't a lot of architecture leadership forums. And that's where I think it's been really helpful to have a common altitude among this membership. So if that sounds like you, reach out to us, Grant and Brian, or we're also building chiefarchitectnetwork.com. Should have our application site out there very soon. But it's been a lot of fun bringing this group together, and we have about 255 of us strong internationally, and we're sort of bridging into our next chapter. So very excited to be sharing that adventure with you, and hope you continue to stay with us in our story.
All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap up. Grant, can you tell us when is our next event and what can people expect if they want to check that out?
Absolutely. So we have kind of a special event coming up here on Thursday. They got a little bit clustered together, which is kind of fun, actually. Gives you a lot of chances to engage with us. So on Thursday at 11 Eastern, I believe, we'll be having on Luca De Risi, who is the CEO of Mega International. He's a tool provider in his company that helps enterprise architecture practices execute. Now, he's not on to talk about that, though. What we're going to be learning about is what makes architecture practices stick. He's seen a million come and go as a CEO of a company that sells architecture tooling, and he's going to give us some advice. And then for those of you that also might be interested, the following Monday on the 10th at also 11 Eastern, we're going to be on with a gentleman named Brian McDonald of the Digital Board. And he's going to be bringing us together to talk about how chief architects get hired. It's a tricky market out there right now. So we're going to be hearing from somebody who's in the trenches, helping all of us find our roles and get placed, and with some advice that will be pretty helpful in navigating that journey. So I hope to see you in one or many of these, and very much appreciate the chance to sort of launch our platform with you today. Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, all these events are going to be live on LinkedIn. They're all always going to be free of charge and open to whoever is interested. So hope you'll be able to join us and participate in the next edition of Chief Architect Network Live. Thanks for the time, everyone.
Take care.